Imagine you're prepping for a massive presentation, right? You need a compelling executive summary.
Oh, we've all been there.
Exactly. So you feed a few bullet points into a popular AI tool, and it spits out this brilliant, beautifully written page of text.
And you just use it.
You use it. The presentation is a total hit. But then, like 2 weeks later, you get a cease and desist letter in the mail.
Ouch. Yeah, that's the nightmare scenario.
It turns out that beautifully written text was lifted almost word for word from a copyrighted, paywalled industry report. So who gets sued here?
That is the big question.
Right. Like, do you get sued for presenting it? Does the AI company get sued for generating it? Or does the original author just, lose out because the technology is too new?
I mean, it is the single most expensive legal question in the tech world right now.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have built a society completely dependent on these generative tools. But when they break the law, the legal system essentially just short circuits. We're trying to regulate a technology from 2026 using a legal framework built for the internet of 2010.
Which is wild. And if you're listening to this right now, this legal gray zone directly impacts how you work, how you create, and really how you use the internet every single day.
It affects everyone.
Totally. So today, we are diving into a highly influential paper by Professor Cheng from Tsinghua University. It's titled On the Inapplicability of Online Infringement Rules to Generative AI Infringement.
It's a dense read, but so important.
Okay, let's unpack this. The mission here is to figure out exactly why our current laws are failing so spectacularly and how the courts are scrambling to fix it before the entire system breaks down.
Right. And to understand why generative AI is breaking the legal system, we first have to understand the old rules of the road.
The 2010 Internet rules.
Exactly. So Professor Cheng's paper points directly to the framework that has governed the internet for years. Specifically, the online infringement rules found in the PRC Civil Code. Globally, these are often referred to as safe harbor laws. And they essentially divide the internet into two totally separate camps. You have network technology service providers and network content service providers.
Let's translate that a bit. So the technology providers, those are your ISPs, like the search engines, the broadband companies, the cloud storage servers.
Right, the infrastructure.
Yeah. Historically, the law looks at them as completely neutral actors. They're just the plumbing. So if a user uploads a pirated 4K movie to a public cloud drive, the cloud company doesn't automatically get sued for that.
No, they don't.
They only get in trouble if the copyright holder sends them an official notice and the company ignores it and leaves the movie up. That is the classic notice and takedown rule.
Exactly. Their liability is entirely based on failing to act after being warned. I mean, they aren't expected to police every single file being uploaded in real time. That would be impossible.
Right.
Then you have the second camp, the content providers. These are your news websites, online magazines, official corporate blogs.
Because they're actively creating this stuff.
Yes, because they are actively hiring writers, editing articles, curating exactly what goes on their front page. They're considered publishers. They do not get a warning. If they publish something defamatory or stolen, they are liable from the very second it goes live.
Okay, so the classic analogy here is the highway versus the driver.
I like that.
Yeah. So the technology providers built the highway. You don't sue the highway authority if two drivers get into a crash, right?
Right.
But the content providers are the drivers themselves. They're behind the wheel making active decisions, so they hold the liability.
It's a very clean binary system. You are either the passive highway or the active driver.
Wait, hold on, though. I have to challenge that binary a little bit, especially when you talk about search engines.
Oh, here we go.
No, I mean, Google or Bing might not write the articles, but their algorithms absolutely curate the internet. They decide what goes on page 1 and what gets buried on page 10.
That's true.
That is a massive editorial decision. How is that not acting like a content provider?
Well, it's a very common argument, and courts have actually had to draw a hard line on this over the years. The paper brings up a landmark U.S. case, Force v. Facebook, from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals.
Okay, what did they say?
They established a key precedent. The court ruled that using an algorithm to sort, rank, or match user content does not make you a publisher.
Really? Why not?
Because you are fundamentally taking third-party information that already exists and just organizing it. What's fascinating here is that you might be putting up very specific directional signs on the highway, but you are not manufacturing the cars. The underlying content was still created by someone else.
Okay, I see the distinction. A search engine retrieves, it doesn't create.
Exactly.
But that brings us crashing into the current crisis, doesn't it? Because generative AI is not just a search engine retrieving an existing website.
Not at all.
And it's not exactly a blogger typing out an article either. It completely shatters that binary system.
It really does. It introduces an entirely new paradigm. Professor Cheng breaks down the architecture of this technology into 4 core elements:
Feature.
data, algorithms, computing power, and models. When you put those 4 things together, the AI isn't retrieving. It is engaging in what the paper calls an active act, or a commission.
An active act.
Right. It is generating novel information that has literally never existed anywhere else before.
But how does it actually do that without just, copying and pasting from its database? I think people always assume an AI image generator just takes a piece of a Picasso painting and digitally stitches it to a piece of a Van Gogh.
Oh, yeah. That is definitely the biggest misconception about generative AI. It doesn't store a giant library of JPEGs or text files to copy from.
It doesn't.
No, it uses deep learning and complex probability distributions. Think about transformer models, which are the backbone of systems like ChatGPT.
Right.
They use something called attention mechanisms.
Okay, wait. What does an attention mechanism actually do in practice, like for a normal person to understand?
Sure. Imagine you are reading a massive, dense detective novel.
Okay.
When you read the word bank, your brain automatically looks at the surrounding context to understand what that word means, right?
Yeah.
If the previous sentence talked about depositing money, you know it's a financial institution. If it talked about a river and a fishing pole, you know it's a muddy riverbank.
Makes sense.
An attention mechanism does exactly that, but mathematically. It calculates the relationship and relevance between every single word in your prompt, weighing them against billions of parameters it learned during training.
Wow.
Yeah, it deeply understands context. So when it generates an output, it is just calculating the statistical probability of what the next most logical word or pixel should be.
So it's synthesizing concepts, not plagiarizing specific files.
Exactly.
But wait, if I build that machine, if I am the AI company, and I wrote that incredibly complex mathematical algorithm, and I actively chose the millions of books and images to feed into it during training, aren't I just a content provider then? I made all the editorial choices up front. Why shouldn't I be fully liable for every single thing the AI spits out?
That's a great question, but it comes down to the technical reality of autonomy. Let's stick with the publisher comparison for a second.
Okay.
A newspaper editor reads the final draft of an article before it goes to the printing press.
Right.
They have 100% control over the output.
Yeah, they do.
AI developers do not have that control. They cannot perfectly predict what their model will actually say.
Because it's fundamentally based on probability, not a hard-coded script.
Precisely. The system is so complex that it operates autonomously based on the user's prompt. This is why we see model hallucinations.
Oh, where it just makes stuff up.
Yeah, where the AI will confidently state a historical fact that is completely fabricated or invent a legal case that never existed. The developer didn't program the AI to lie. The math just calculated a high probability for a sequence of words that happen to be fiction.
That is so wild.
And furthermore, the output is dynamic. If you and I type the exact same prompt into a generative AI tool at the exact same time, we might get 2 entirely different responses.
Right, because of the probability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot be legally classified as a traditional publisher if you cannot actually review or control the final published material.
So they aren't a passive pipe like an ISP because they built a machine that generates new things.
Correct.
But they aren't an active editor like an ICP because the machine operates autonomously and hallucinates.
Yes. They are trapped in this total legal void.
And what the paper highlights is that while legal scholars debate theory, real-world courts are drowning in chaos right now.
Oh, absolutely drowning.
There are actual lawsuits piling up with staggering financial and human stakes. Let's look at how this is actually playing out in court.
The fallout is global, and the courts are basically being forced to make decisions without a clear rulebook.
Let's start with the sheer scale of the financial damage. In September 2025, there was the Anthropic case.
Right, the big one.
Yeah, Anthropic is a major AI startup, and they ended up paying a record-breaking $1.5 billion settlement to a massive group of authors. That is the highest publicly disclosed settlement in a U.S. copyright case ever.
Huge numbers.
And the core of the lawsuit wasn't just about what the AI outputted, but how it was built. Authors discovered that Anthropic's Claude model was allegedly trained on shadow libraries.
Specifically, databases like the Pirate Library Mirror.
Right.
And this case perfectly isolates the data pillar of generative AI that we talked about. The developers needed an unfathomable amount of text to train their model to understand human language.
And they couldn't just buy all those books.
Right. Instead of licensing every single book, they scraped massive data sets. The original act of scraping that pirated data was the infringement. The system was basically poisoned at the root.
So that is a case where the infringement happens before the user even logs on.
Exactly.
But then you have cases where the output itself is the problem, like the Ultraman cases in China.
Oh, those were fascinating.
Courts in Guangzhou and Hangzhou were dealing with lawsuits where AI systems were generating images that were nearly identical to the copyrighted character Ultraman.
Right. So the Anthropic case was about the training data, but the Ultraman cases were about the model's predispositions.
What do you mean by predispositions?
Well, if an AI is generating images that are substantially similar to a protected intellectual property, the courts have to ask, is the math fundamentally flawed? Is the algorithm inherently predisposed to infringe on that specific copyright every time someone types in, say, Japanese superhero?
Ah, I see. It's essentially the model memorizing the IP rather than learning the concept of it.
Exactly.
But, copyright is just the financial side. The source material also discusses some incredibly tragic personal injury cases that show the physical danger of this legal void.
Yeah, these are tough to talk about.
In September 2025, families in New York and Colorado filed lawsuits against OpenAI and Character.ai. They alleged that these AI chatbots generated continuous, highly manipulative content that ultimately pushed teenagers to suicide.
These cases are just heartbreaking. And from a legal perspective, they highlight the unique danger of AI's interactive nature.
How so?
Think about a traditional internet search. If someone searches for harmful content, they might find a static website. But a static website doesn't talk back.
Right, it just sits there.
It doesn't engage in a continuous responsive dialogue that adapts to a user's emotional state in real time. Generative AI creates an intimate feedback loop. It can simulate empathy and escalate conversations autonomously, which is a fundamentally different risk profile than a traditional search engine.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. And the final case the paper points to really isolates the user's role in all of this. It's the ugly face harassment case handled by the Beijing Internet Court.
Yes, a very important case.
The user deliberately took a woman's WeChat avatar and uploaded it into an AI tool. They then used very specific malicious prompts to alter the photo, generating this explicit, deformed anime image of her, which they then spread online to harass her.
This is a crucial distinction that Professor Cheng's paper makes. We have to look at the exact source of the infringement.
Okay.
In the Anthropic case, the system itself was built on pirated data that is system-caused. But in the Beijing harassment case, the AI tool was functioning exactly as designed. It was processing an image based on a prompt.
Right.
The malicious intent and the active generation of harm came entirely from the user. That is user-caused infringement.
So it's the difference between a manufacturer's defect and a weaponized tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if I buy a hammer at a hardware store and I hit someone with it, nobody sues the hardware store. The user had malicious intent. That is the ugly face case.
Perfect analogy.
But if I buy an automated nail gun and the software is glitched so it occasionally fires nails across the room completely on its own, the manufacturer is at fault. That is system-caused.
That analogy cuts right to the heart of the problem. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains exactly why the old notice and takedown rules simply cannot apply to generative AI.
Because notice and takedown requires a specific file to delete.
Exactly. Let's go back to the Ultraman example. A user prompts an AI to make an infringing image of the character. The rights holder sees it, contacts the AI provider, and issues a formal takedown notice under the old internet rules. What physically is the provider supposed to do?
Right. I mean, the image isn't sitting on a public server for anyone to stream. It only existed on that specific user's screen for a fleeting moment generated dynamically in response to a prompt.
So if they can't delete a specific file, what is the alternative? Does the AI company have to go into their multi-billion parameter model and surgically remove any mathematical connection that might lead to an Ultraman image?
It's like asking a baker to unbake a cake.
Yes.
The flour, the eggs, and the sugar are already fundamentally mixed. You can't just pull the eggs out.
You really can't.
The AI company would have to delete massive chunks of their foundational training data, or entirely rewrite the core algorithm. And if they have to change the fundamental math of the machine every time one user manages to generate an edge case infringement, that completely cripples the technology for millions of other users.
That is the dilemma. Applying traditional notice and takedown rules to a dynamic probability engine places an impossible, existential burden on the developers.
It just doesn't work.
You cannot take down a probability. It would entirely stifle innovation because the legal risk of every single prompt would be too high. And on the flip side, treating them as traditional publishers makes them liable for hallucinations they literally cannot control.
So we are left with a system where ISP's rules don't work, ICP rules don't work, and courts are currently just guessing.
Pretty much.
What is Professor Cheng Xiao's solution here? If we abandon these specific online infringement rules for AI, what do we replace them with?
Well, the paper argues that we need to stop trying to force new technology into hyper-specific internet rules and instead return to the bedrock of civil law.
Which is?
General fault-based liability. In the PRC Civil Code, this is rooted in Article 1165.
Fault-based liability, meaning instead of a procedural checklist of sending notices and deleting files, the court has to actually look at who did something wrong and why.
Precisely. It brings nuance back into the courtroom. Under a fault-based system, a judge has to ask deep, contextual questions about negligence and intent.
Like what?
Like, did the AI company act negligently in their initial design? For example, did they knowingly scrape shadow libraries, like in the Anthropic case? Did they fail to implement basic safety guardrails and content filters before releasing the model to the public?
And if they failed there, then the system is at fault.
Right.
But if the company did build a robust system, like if they licensed their data legally, built strong safety filters, and did everything right, but a user intentionally deployed a complex jailbreak prompt to bypass those filters and create harassment material,
Then the fault shifts entirely to the user.
that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. It evaluates the responsibility based on specific actions, the technological reality, and the actual fault of the parties involved.
It's much more adaptable.
It is. It acknowledges that generative AI is a shared environment. It is no longer just a platform providing a service to a passive consumer. It is a tool that requires active collaboration between the developer's algorithm and the user's prompt.
It basically replaces that broken binary radar gun we talked about at the beginning with a full, comprehensive accident investigation.
That's a great way to put it.
You have to look at the design of the car, the state of the road, and the intent of the driver all at once.
Yes.
And for you, listening to this, that is the most critical takeaway. As we navigate this increasingly tech-heavy world, the tools you are using to write emails, generate code, or create graphics are not passive utilities.
No, they aren't. When you type a prompt into a generative AI, you're not just searching the web. You are actively directing a highly complex autonomous engine to create something entirely new.
It's a collaboration.
And under a fault-based legal framework, your choices, what you ask it to do, and how you choose to use the output carry profound legal weight.